Hey everybody, this is Zeus coming at you semi-live and pre-recorded on Sounds and Grounds, our little experimentals here. This is our lucky number 6 episode. I am here today, of course, with my partner in Thyme and partner in Mime, Mr. Jack Costo. And we have a really, really cool guest today. I know everybody's been waiting for real for this one. We have Nicole Papastavrou from Kallias right here. Of course, I messed up saying your first name.
The
Which,
easy part, right?
right,
You
yeah.
got the last name perfect.
I did do my research. I'm like, I know you've done videos, and I'm obviously not Greek by heritage vocabulary. I have a very large respect for Greek culture, hence the name Zeus. But I'm like, I'm going to make sure I get the last name because, you have nicknames. People call you Pasta. I think it's really funny. I have my own made up version of your name that I say in my head when I'm referring to you. Um, but yeah, Nicole, here she is. I'll shut up. It's a welcome. Thank you very much for doing this. How's everything going? How are you? I know you're super busy, so I'll let you kind of jump to the front of the class here and get rolling.
Oh, yeah, it's going great. I'm stoked to be here. Thanks for having me as one of your first guests on the show. I'm really stoked that you're starting to do this podcast. It's really awesome. And
Thank
yeah,
you.
of course, it's I think this is the busiest month of the year for me. So, and for Kallias too, we're releasing our first LP on the 25th, titled First Ascent. And we just released a music video, Lungta to Everlasting. And we have a couple more coming out as well. So, yeah,
Awesome.
lots of editing, lots of practice, rehearsals with the West Coast members right now. And soon we'll have our bassist flying out here before the tour, and we'll all be together, and we'll all be missing JP, of course. He can't make this one.
All right.
Um, so yeah, looking forward to it all.
Cool.
There's just not
So,
enough hours in the day right now with the amount of work that needs to get done.
right. And not enough people to do all the work. So we're looking forward to the cloning technology. Hopefully
Yes.
AI can solve some issues there. So
Yeah,
you
that'd be
mentioned
great.
you got a tour. Is this your first West Coast tour? You're going out with Cyborg Octopus. Is that the band, right?
Yes, we're so excited to be doing our first West Coast tour with Cyborg Octopus. I did a lot of research on, different West Coast bands that we would want to go out with. I asked around a lot. Of course, I asked my trusted sources in the Bay Area. I'm like, who's like the best, you know, death metal prog band to like do our first West Coast tour with? And quite a few people were telling me Cyborg Octopus. And I checked him out and I'm like, oh man, these guys are so awesome. And I actually got the chance to meet a few of them when I went up to the Zenith Passage show in the Bay Area. So a few of them were there, and they're super nice guys, and they're all, really psyched to do the tour as well. So yeah.
Right on. Yeah. So when does the tour start for you?
The tour kicks off on the 25th, so the day that our album drops. We'll be having our album release show really close to my house, actually, in Fullerton. So it's only
Nice.
like a 15-20 minute drive for me, which is cool. True hometown show for me, I guess. Yeah, and then it's 5 dates in California and Vegas.
Wow. That's
Mhm.
awesome. And it's the hottest part of the year, so that's a good time to be in Vegas. So
Yes. We will
congratulations.
have AC, thankfully.
Yeah. Yes. So originally, I know a lot of things online say New Jersey. I know you lived in Jersey for a while, but you have
I
band
didn't.
members. Oh, no, you didn't.
Yeah, I didn't actually. Yeah, I always lived in like Brooklyn,
Oh,
Queens area.
right
Yeah.
on, right on. But the your other two members, JP and Chris, drum and bass respectively, they're Northeast United States, right?
Yeah, JP is in Jersey and Chris is in Connecticut.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And me and Colin are here, so now we're equally split.
Right. Yeah. So speaking of Colin, that brings us perfectly into our kind of first group of questions here. How did you get Stanley Clarke's jazz guitar player to play an alien proggy death band with 8 strings? That's just amazing. I know he's listed as a guest on the new album, and of course, anyone that follows you, you have a awesome Twitter community. Your Discord is growing. I think I'm the only one that really posts memes on there, but I entertain myself on
I love it. Yeah.
I'm my worst
I see
meme
them. Don't
enemy.
worry.
Yeah, yeah. So how did that come about? Speaking of, collabs and stuff, and
Mhm.
what's the history there with having him in the band?
So at the time, we were looking for another guitar player. I really do owe that to my rep at Jackson, Mike Tempesta. He, I was asking around and he suggested Colin, because he recently hooked him up with Charvel.
Mm.
And I checked him out and I'm like, wow, this guy is really amazing player. And he's here in LA. That's awesome. Like I'm looking for, super shredder, and someone with kind of like different chops than me. Right. So, I checked him out and we set up a meeting and, I told him like, hey, I'm looking for somebody, like to be in the band, right? Like I'm not looking really for like a fill-in or anything. So if that's something you're interested in, and he was like pretty psyched to do it. And this is like his first like real like metal, like heavy, death metal, prog metal band that he's in. And he's a total metalhead, right? But like he's doing the jazz thing full time. So I think it's cool that this is also like an outlet for him to do something different. So yeah, we're really, really psyched
Yeah.
to have him. And yeah, he's a guest on this first record because, obviously the record we had written with our old guitar player. So it only seemed appropriate to give him like a proper guest spot before him actually joining the band. So that's the way we did it. And I'm glad to just have him like on the record, just in general. Um, and then, of course, like the first song that we wrote together and put out together with Colin was Mouthless Embassy. So it was really awesome collaborating with him, and sitting down and like working the riffs. Like we worked so fast together. Like I think we sat down one day for a few hours at his place, and I didn't even like bring anything with me as far as like prepared material or riffs. Like I think I just started jamming something and he basically like completed my sentence like with whatever I did, and we had a
Wow.
few riffs, right? So I'm like, okay, now I have, I got some stuff to work with. I had a few riffs to work with. I went home. I tracked everything the way I track stuff, and I started like structuring and arranging the song, um, and then adding orchestrations and everything. And then I went back to his place another time because, I kind of wanted to pick his brain about like the orchestrations that I had done and like the chord choice and basically, theory stuff that I don't have the knowledge. I just kind of have the ear. So
Mm.
I know how
Yeah.
to write, but I'm like, well, it would be nice, someone with like extensive theory knowledge like him to, kind of like check my paper, right? So
Right.
I'm
Sure.
like, check
Yeah.
out these chords. Like, do you think that, they could be stacked better, or could I do something more interesting here? And he was really great at that and so fast, just to like kind of embellish those orchestrations. And even with the chorus, um, I had like the rhythm written and I had some chords, but he helped me make those chords a little bit more interesting. So it
Yeah.
was, yeah, it was really awesome. Like our first, collaborative writing session together, and I look forward to more with the next album.
Yeah, when I heard the song, I was super stoked because it's a lot has a lot more precision than first 4 songs like your EP. Plus, you have Ole from EXTOL as well on the
Yeah.
song. Um, how did you swing that one? It's just like
You
the
know,
hits
I
just
really
keep
don't
coming.
know. I really don't know. That was such a shot in the dark. And, you know, I have to say, like, I'm a newer EXTOL fan, as in like the last few years here. You know, obviously, because Justin had told me about them and he's a huge EXTOL fan, and like everyone in Faceless was like, you know, EXTOL fans. So they took a lot of influence from that. And so I started listening to them. And when I wrote this song with Colin, uh, Justin was like, "Oh, he's like, I can tell you've been listening to a lot of EXTOL." He's like, you should just get Ola to be on that chorus. And I'm like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, right. You know, I'm like,
Sure.
I'm like wishful thinking, and I'm like, you know what? Life is short. It never
Right.
hurts to ask. It never hurts to ask. So I was like, I just like sent a message, and I think like coincidentally, I had recently done a little EXTOL cover on
Oh,
Instagram.
right on. Yeah.
And I remember him commenting on it. And I'm like, all right, well, he knows I exist. So that's a
Right.
start.
He commented on
I'm like, this
Instagram, so
he
there you go,
commented on
kids.
my video. And I'm like,
It's
all
the
right,
end. It's
why
the end
not?
for everyone.
You know, it's not too random. Like he knows I'm a fan, like I'm playing his material, whatever. So I just
Right.
hit him up and I sent him the track, and of course, like any guest that like I've ever asked to work with, it's very like I try to make it as casual as possible, meaning like, you know, this isn't just a business thing. Like you know, yeah, I want to take care of your time and your efforts, but I want to make sure that you're into this song too.
Mm,
Because if it's
right.
not something that like is really your thing, like I feel like you can tell, like it sounds forced or like, you know what I mean? So I'm always like, just check out the song and see if it's in your style, if it's something you'd even want to do, if you have time to do it, whatever. So I sent him the track and he's like, "Oh, this is a really cool track." And you know, the next thing he asked me was like, because I asked him about vocals, and he's like, "Oh, well, you know, is it singing or screaming?" And I'm like, "Oh, it'd be singing. It's for the chorus." And then he's like, "Okay, cool." And he's like, "Well," he's like, what about a guitar solo? I don't hear any guitar solo." Um, and I asked him, like, I was like, well, actually, Colin is going to be doing a solo on this song. It's just not recorded yet. So there will definitely be a guitar solo.
Yeah.
And then he just asked, he's like, well, do you mind if I like take a stab at one as well? And I'm like, yeah.
No,
I'm like, of
I don't
course.
want you
I'm like, nah, I'm
mucking
good.
up my song. Just sing the chorus. Jeez, come on, guy.
I'm like, okay, I guess I'm like, not only is he gonna do vocals on it, but he's like wanting to do a guitar solo too. So I'm like, man, this is awesome. Like, how lucky could we get? Um, so I'm so stoked, like, and I still like can't believe that he's on it.
Yeah.
And we got the chance to meet him when we were out in Norway, and coincidentally, he was playing shows with his like funk group, and it happened to be on my birthday. So I don't know like what the fuck
Wow.
kind of stars aligned for me this year, but it literally was coincidence
Wow.
that
That's
he
awesome.
was playing in Norway on my birthday, and it was the last night that we were in Oslo. So
Wow.
we went to that show, and it was just incredible. It was just perfect live performance. Everything was sounded amazing, and yeah, it was great.
That's so awesome. Yeah, it's really cool to see uh one that he was excited about your songs. And Jack and I talk about this a lot too, because they've also had guests. Roy from Camelot sang on one of their
Oh,
songs, The
cool.
Seven Spires. And
Nice.
you know people sometimes don't like their guy or their singer doing things for other albums, but you're like the third or fourth example where someone hears a song, they like it, and they want to do it, they want to make it better, and that's so cool. And you think, well, it's not going to get any better than this, and then I look at the
Yeah.
liner notes and it's like, Oh yeah, you've also got Jeff Loomis guesting on a song as well. Just like it's like, wow, could you have any more cool guests on the album than you do? I don't think so. So you got to have some things set up for the next one. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, was that the same kind of deal where it's like, I'm just going to reach out? I know there's a big Jackson connection, and I'm just
Yeah,
itching to talk about the Jackson that's hanging up behind you.
of course. Yeah.
um, I'm like so excited that you posted that before our podcast. I'm like, we're going to talk about that. That might be the final hour of the podcast is just talking about
Yeah.
that. I even had to get out my old Jackson, the Stealth, in honor of this podcast today to fly the flag. I mean, you know, if you look at Grover Jackson, who originally started the company, and it kind of has progressed, obviously, way farther than he could have ever got it on its own. But you have to respect them, what they've done, the artists that they've kind of nurtured and helped move forward with their instruments. Nothing but respect for that company. And the fact that they really seem to bend over backwards for you, who at the moment is unsigned in your band, and not a million people out there yet. But I like what they're doing. They're very much in the vein that I am with my company. Is you treat everybody like they're the superstar, because eventually they're going to, certain people are going to be the star. So hats off to those guys for what they're doing. I researched after you posted. I'm like, what is this? Because it's got a Rhodes on the back end. It's got part of a warrior on the front, but then it's also a sharp star, because a couple people are like, oh, it's a Rhodes warrior. I'm like, no, that front horn is sharp and pointed, unlike any other. It's like they took the V horn and flipped it and put it on the front. So I was calling it the Roadstar Warrior. But I know you got to
Yeah.
have a name for it. You want to take a few minutes to talk about that guitar and Jackson, and like
Sure.
how that whole thing came about? Your relationship with them would be cool.
Oh, yeah. So, again, it really started with Mike Tempesta.
Right.
He's done.
That's John's brother.
Yes,
John
it
Tempesta, the
is.
drummer. Yeah, he played
It
in
is. Yeah.
Power Man 5000.
Yep.
He was a rep for a little while, I think, because he played Schecter for a while. And I actually had talked to him on the phone because I used to sell Schecters way back in the day, and I think he'd been a rep, but I had a bunch of his guitars. The shop I'd worked for had bought them, and he had signed them, and I had spoke to him. This is years ago. But super cool dude. It's an odd name, so I'm like, it's got to be the same guy. So I
Yeah,
just
it
wanted to
is.
confirm. Right on. Very cool.
Yeah, so I was I'd been with EVH for quite some time, and while I was with EVH, I was with that Italian company, Luteria Rocks, and I was with that company for probably like 5 years, while I was also with EVH. And so, eventually I wanted to try something different, and the invitation had already been there to go to Jackson because of the connection with Fender and Mike Tempesta. So it really just felt natural to continue that relationship and broaden it to Jackson. And, I've always thought they're amazing guitars. They have a really sick roster of artists that playing and doing like really cool custom shop stuff as well. So I remember in 2020, when I told Mike, I'm like, okay, like I think I'm ready to, make the jump to Jackson now, right? And he's like, well, he's like, we don't have a lot for you, so just so you know, it's gonna be a custom shop. And I'm like, perfect. I'm basically like, I know I'm difficult. I'm gonna need
Right.
custom shop.
Yeah, you can't go to Guitar Center and get a fan fret multi-scale. At the time, you couldn't get it.
I know.
But that's cool.
I'm not like a stock person. Like, here, just take this. I'm like,
None
oh
of none of us
man.
are. No,
I
who
can
wants to be
play, yeah.
stock? Yeah,
No,
yeah.
I know it, and just also like playing 8 string, which makes it even more like difficult. Like, it just kind of narrows down your options as far as companies and guitars, and whatnot. But yeah, when I heard custom shop, I'm like, oh man, like I want to make something that's just never been done before, and really like turn some heads and just build like my dream guitar. And that's what they did for that first custom. I had like the idea to do like the flush pick guard and put the piezo pickup in an 8 string,
Hmm.
which I hadn't seen been done before either. um, and now with this new one, I kind of wanted to make, use similar colors, but do just like a yin to the yang and make it way more aggressive, kind of like its
Sure.
evil twin, right? So that was the whole point with this guitar. I don't even know what to call the shape yet because uh, it is a custom shape, and I remember seeing a Rhodes Warrior, but of course there were still things that I wanted to change about the shape. So I had found a Rhodes Warrior, and then I drew over the points to kind of show Joe Williams like I want this, but like this and pointier, and I want this
Right.
to come out and whatever. So eventually they sent me the mock-up and we went through a couple, and I was like, yeah, like that's it. That's the one. So, and then
Yeah.
doing like the 8 in line reverse headstock. I wanted to do like a darker the ebony fretboard for this one. I kind of learned my lesson with the pale moon ebony and
Hmm.
doing the abalone um the shark inlays, which you can't
Right.
even really
Right.
see. They're basically non-existent to me because I'm like, man, it's so busy that like I had to relearn the fretboard with the
Right.
pale moon. So I'm like, okay, like I got my fix, like I got my pale moon fix, and I love it. It's beautiful, but I probably won't do it again. So this time I got the ebony fretboard, and I did lumen lay the shark inlays,
Right. Right.
so
Yeah.
they'll glow. Which actually I haven't even looked at it in the dark yet. I should probably do that.
Yeah. You're too busy
Yeah,
looking at it
I
and like scrutinizing the bright light. Like,
yeah, I haven't even like charged them up and looked at it in the dark. Damn.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. Like, how long did it take them? I'm curious because most custom shops are like 1 to 2 years, and the fact that they made you, uh, independent artist, a custom shape is like unheard of. Like, it's typically it has to be, one of these shapes, and we will customize the specs. But you, like you said, you drew on a piece of paper like I want this, this, and this. Like that's really awesome. They did that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they do that for artists. I don't
Oh,
know
right,
about
right.
like if like general public can request that. I don't know. I
Hmm.
really don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it did take a long time only because there was just such a, long line of custom orders, right? So I remember putting in this idea like a year and a half ago.
Hmm.
But apparently, this guitar was much easier to build and much faster to build than my last custom.
Hmm. Wow.
So, my last custom, it was really complicated, like with the piezo and, picking out the pale moon and everything. Also, finding a one piece swamp ash body,
Right.
so it's not like book matched or anything. It's like I was adamant on having one piece. Um, so that took a while. And with this guitar, I think like we had to wait like 6 months for the wenge to come in for the
Hmm.
neck pieces.
Yeah.
But everything else seemed to be like pretty simple. So yeah, I was glad to hear that. I'm like, oh, that's good to know.
Cool.
Yeah, it was like
And
one of the first things that my builder said. He's like, oh yeah, this was much easier to make than your last one. And I'm like, okay, cool.
I
I'm like, 7 string version.
mm,
yeah, I was just the last tour we did, Insomnium, were also on the bill, and Marcus is a Jackson artist. And
Oh, cool.
he picked up his latest custom shop on like in the middle of the tour. The rep brought it out, and he said
Oh,
he was waiting for that one for 3 years, and it was just a
mm.
Rhodes, one pickup, like nothing fancy. And
oh
it
my
like,
God.
I mean, he's in Finland, so like maybe something with that, but like even
Oh,
then, you lucked out with such a short time period for either, I guess.
Damn. Yeah. And I thought like a year and a half was like, I don't know, like, oh, I'm like, it's okay. They forgot about me. Or of course, I'm like, there's bigger artists that need guitars faster for bigger tours. I'm like, I get it.
Yeah.
But no, like they always come through. And yeah, I feel like very, very lucky to even like be able to get something like that from such an awesome company.
Yeah, you at one point I remember you saying that you didn't play seven strings in one of your Twitch streams or something, and I was like kind of bummed. It's like, oh man, seven's like my jam. I like eight strings, are cool, but like I gravitate towards seven. And then when
Mm.
you had the Loomis model in your video that came out, I was like, that's not an eight string.
Yeah. I know,
I was so
missing a
stoked.
string.
Yeah, but you still tuned it down. You did drop A, so that was like, yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did drop A, and I remember hitting up Mike Tempesta, and I was like, "Hey, I accidentally wrote a seven-string song, and I think it's gonna be easier to play it on a seven." Um, so
Yeah.
he's like, "Oh, okay," and then he's like, "Oh, like, would you like, a Loomis?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." Um, and of course, like I'm always like, oh, like I want to try it first and see if I like it or whatever. And he sent it to me, and like I kept it for like about a month, and I'm like, oh yeah, this thing plays awesome. It is so like fast and riffy, and the quality is really, really good. So yeah, I hung on to it, and I'm like, all right, this is gonna be the seven string guitar.
Right. So you're taking
So
that one out on the road, the
you
Loomis,
know,
or
I
no?
actually decided not to, only because um I think for this tour I am not going to switch guitars during our set.
Hmm.
So I'm trying to like make my life easier by just taking two eight strings, so a backup, instead of like, a two. I don't even have two seven strings, so it's
Right.
like a seven string and then bring two eight
Two
strings. It,
eights.
it was,
Right.
yeah, I'm really trying to minimize. And although, yeah, it's so cool to change guitars in the middle of your set, but it's fine. I'm gonna just tune down one string. It's
Hmm.
gonna be way faster, way more
Sure.
efficient. I allowed myself like time before and after Mouthless Embassy to do that. So yeah, I'm gonna just be playing that new thing the whole time.
Wow. I don't think mono makes cases. I know you're a mono creation artist. That's one of the
Yeah.
reasons we sort of shy away from a lot of the touring folks using the crazy metal shapes, because it's just, everyone's downscaling. I know you use processing and modeling instead of real amps for the most part. And if we have time to touch on that, it's all
Mhm.
about efficiency and
Yeah.
having a huge 8 foot long case for a really cool one-off guitar. Is you kind of weigh the options of like, well, do I bring this or do I just keep it simple and have a standard shape? But yeah, that thing is such a monster. It's like you got to show that thing off. Um,
Yeah. I
you don't
honestly
have an
I
option,
didn't really think as far as traveling with it.
right?
And
Well,
yeah, sometimes I don't completely think things through, but I I'm bringing it on this West Coast tour, but for the next tour where I'll have to travel a little bit further and go on an airplane, I'm not really sure how I'm going to do that yet. Because there is not a case, like I wouldn't check that guitar in the case that it came with.
right,
Like,
right.
yeah, it's a hard case, but it's not a flight
Yeah.
case. So I wouldn't do that.
It's a
Uh,
flight risk putting that standard case on an airplane.
I don't even think they would let me bring that on board. It's pretty damn pointy, right?
uh
So I don't know.
The guitar, they would. I mean, it's not
I know I'm
like a web.
kidding,
I
but
don't
like
know. Jack has the experience flying with guitars
I
more
mean,
than
I,
you do.
I think that was a joke,
Oh,
but
it totally was. I'm like, it's
uh,
too deadly
yeah.
to bring on board.
yeah.
Wah,
Um,
wah, I missed the joke.
but
That's okay.
I'll
The,
cross that bridge when I come to it. But so far, like, I'll be able to play it on the West Coast tour because I'm just gonna bring it in its regular case, and then I'll bring my other custom in a smaller case, so they shouldn't take up too much room.
Cool. That's awesome. One of the things I mentioned to you about talking about real quick is Kallias, which is a Greek word for beauty, right? Your heritage is Greek, so obviously it translates through the band, but it's more of a obtuse beauty. The music, it has its own sort of ugly beauty to ears, which is cool. It's not a riff at all. But you originally were, if people don't know or follow you or familiar with you, instrumental. And you had shared a while ago, I think last year, you had been on a show, the Hit Parade or No Cover. And I had never heard of that program. I think they only did one season. Maybe there's a second one coming out, where you have all kinds of crazy, famous musicians judging original bands, playing original songs. And one of the things I reminded me to mention this is talking about kind of putting all your eggs in a basket when you are going out to impress. So I wanted to ask you just about that show, what your feelings were, if you felt like it helped or hurt the band. Also, the big thing is, did you take to heart what they said about having vocals? Because several of the judges were like, I was waiting for vocals. I wanted to sing over this and stuff like that. And, fast forward a few months, you and Chris, your bass player, now somehow miraculously are singers and have learned how to sing in a crazy short amount of time, which is awesome. I know you took lessons or taking lessons from Raffle from Decapitated. So that's a whole chunk of things. I spread it all out and try to condense it. So your transition to singing and adding that, was that directly from, people like Alice Cooper and Tobin and the Bush guy, Rossdale? Did that influence you and give you direction from what their opinion was of the band?
So we had actually decided to look for a singer before we went on that show, but we hadn't found anybody yet. And we got the invitation to be on the show. We kind of looked at who the roster of judges were, and apparently, they were looking for an instrumental metal band because, obviously, Tosin, Animals as Leaders. And then we looked at the other bands on the roster, and there really weren't, there were no other, prog or, really heavy metal bands. So it was just, I think they were looking for diversity or whatever. And of course, you're talking to a marketing person too. So I'm like, I'm like, well, I was like, if we do this, then we don't get PR this year. This is our this is going to be our marketing for this year. So we get the plane tickets, come out to Cali or whatever, and just do the show, even if we're on one episode, 2 episodes, whatever. We ended up being on 2 episodes, which was cool. And them telling us, oh, we want to hear vocals. We kind of like I said, we had already been looking for a vocalist, but we just couldn't find anyone. And it was a really weird time too, because it was in the pandemic. So it's we're looking around hey, do you want to join this band that we just started and our entire industry just crashed? You know what I mean? So it's kind of
sign me up.
Yeah, we're not going to make any money, but this is a project and it's proggy and metal and whatever. So I guess it's not very enticing. We're a baby band in the pandemic, right? So when we did the show and, everyone was oh, we want to hear vocals over your stuff, it kind of just lit a fire under our ass. And we're you know what? We can't be waiting around for anyone anymore. We need to just take this into our own hands. Chris is already a classically trained vocalist, and he's been doing vocals for a very long time. So
Oh,
he's
wow.
had his solo project. Where he plays all the instruments, and he does vocals on that. So he knows how to sing, and he's a great singer. So that was already there. And then I was like, all right, well, I'll just learn how to scream. How hard could it be? And I found out how hard it was very quickly, because there's so much technique to it that you don't
Right.
realize. People think like, oh, vocalists have it easy or whatever. Yeah, maybe they don't need to carry a bunch of shit into the gig, but
Right.
like there really is like there really
Oh,
is
I gotta
technique. I
carry
know.
this into the
Not even
gig.
that. I mean, come on. A lot of don't even show
Everyone
up
like,
with it. Yeah. So
Oh, hold on. I got,
yeah,
I'm
just
here. I'm
you gotta
ready.
carry a drink in. I know. So yeah, I was just like, all right, well, we're tracking this single in a few months. So we kind of like already had that deadline, and we're like, all right, this is gonna be the first song that we put vocals over. And it was super massive. So we hadn't even I don't even think yeah, we hadn't even released Supermassive yet, but we included it in that set that we played at No Cover,
Right.
because we just still thought that it was our catchiest song, even instrumentally.
Yeah.
So
For
we
sure.
played an unreleased song there, and it's somehow the timing of it, like, and this was my plan, right? I was like, we're gonna play this unreleased song that is meant to have vocals on it, and then hopefully the show comes out when we do release that song with vocals. And it kind of worked out that way, right? I
Right.
think the show came out afterwards, but it was fine still. Like we still got like all that traffic to come to like our like the video Supermassive, because so many people were like, oh, I want to hear that song with vocals. And then I would just like comment back and be like, here's the link and here's the music video. Right.
Right.
So yeah, it worked out. The timing worked out really nice. And yeah, so I had 3 months, and I know Rafal from Decapitated, and I know that he does vocal lessons. So I hit him up and I'm like, hey, I know you're doing vocal lessons. I have to scream on this track in like 3 months. Like, do you think you can get me ready? And he's like, oh yeah, I'll get you ready. So we did some lessons, and he taught me like all the exercises and basically how to, properly use like your fry and your false chords and combine them, so that you're not straining, so you don't get hurt really.
Sure. Right.
And yeah, so you got me ready, for Supermassive, and I tracked that. And I think over the course of like a year after that, my vocals just continued to develop and just get better and better. So now, yeah, I'm just trying to like hone in on it and find my sound and just keep practicing.
Yeah. And on top of that, you're still playing guitar. It's not like, oh, I'm not gonna play guitar. Like
Yeah.
I explained that because you're one of the bands, along with Jack's band, I play the stuff constantly. Like friends of mine, or like I was at a friend's birthday party over the weekend, and I'm talking about both bands and other bands that I'm into. I'm like, you got to check this out. Like, you got to listen to what's going on with the vocals. You got to listen to the guitar. Like, listen to these harmonies and these synths. I've broken down all the songs and the bands that I really like, so I can explain it to people and be like, okay, so check this out. Go watch this video, because they don't like, it's cool that you do the harsh vocals and Chris does a clean. And I think that probably came from a little bit of what I saw in the video from the show you're on, because you're like, well, we don't want to have the vocals just going rah rah rah, and that was a big thing for the judges. I think Alice Cooper was one that was like, one of the bands was a heavier
Oh,
band.
he's like, I can't
Yeah,
understand
it's like
the
I want to get into what he's saying and I can't understand. It's like,
yeah.
well, dude, you're like 900 years old. It's not for you to understand.
I'm
Sorry.
still processing the fact that they looked for an instrumental metal band just to tell them that they wanted to hear vocals.
Right.
Like, you for it.
That's
Well,
a setup. It's almost like a setup, man. Like,
well, we're talking about reality TV here, so I am not surprised.
yeah. See, Jack
Yeah.
always has that. Wait a minute, something's not right here. Like, you're gonna talk shit about the instrumental band for not having a singer. All right.
Yeah, but then they did this twist, like they didn't tell anybody. They tried to like pair together like members from other
Oh,
bands and like yeah, and we just kind of like weren't having that.
so they
So,
gave you a vocalist or something, or to
yeah,
try?
so like there was this other band, not even a band. It was like just the guy's name.
Or like a solo
And then
guy? I
it was
know a
like a
guy was
solo
like
guy and
Knife Cutter or Knife Blade or something like that. He was like an old country
I don't
guy or
know.
something. It was funny.
Yeah,
I
I
got
don't
hooked on
remember.
watching it.
But yeah, it was kind of like this, I don't know, I guess his vocals were very like kind of Queen style. Like he had amazing voice, really great
Yeah.
singer. And he kind of had like a grit to his vocals too. So he had a band, like it was his name, and then he had players in his band too. So I guess they weren't really into their music or the band, but they really liked his vocals and they saw something in his vocals. And then it was like we had this issue of like we have this awesome band and they really liked our music, but we're missing vocals. So that's why they tried to like pair us with him.
Yeah.
And we initially agreed to have him like write some lyrics and do a vocal performance over the songs that we had already. But he like had this idea to start a new project and like write a song together and then have that performance ready in like 48 hours. So I'm like, we don't really operate that way. Like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to write a song and have it performance ready and you know, create a new live session and orchestrations and that, like you don't realize
Yeah.
what goes into like progressive metal. Like it's not
Yeah.
just like you jam for a day, we have a song and like let's do it. Like there's so much that goes on into like the pre-production process and the writing process and like so it just immediately that kind of turned me off and I'm like I'm not trying to start a new project for one
Right.
or like write a song and perform it on this show in 2 days. Like no. So it's
Yeah, like,
either like
what
you
about
like
this?
we
Sorry.
have all these songs, you like just put lyrics over one of them and that's it. That's like one piece to the puzzle. It's going to be so much easier and it's going to sound so much better. Perform it in a couple days. But he didn't want to do that. So like we then because of that we didn't stay on the show because he didn't want to do that.
That's
So
so
I'm like,
not
whatever.
pro.
I had tried.
Like he's an amateur. Like you didn't send mouthless embassy to Ola, and he's like, "How about we just write a new song for the public, and you can make a video instead of me just kind of working on what you have already." It's like that's not what I asked you to do. We wanted
Oh,
just a vocalist.
I mean, listen, for Ola, I would have done that
right?
anyway,
Sure.
and then I would have just found a different guest to put on our song. So, I mean, I would love to actually like write a song with him, start to finish.
Right, sure.
Like, and I know it's something you wanted to ask too, like about collabs, right? So
yeah,
if I had to pick
who your
someone,
collab was, right?
it would be him. You
But
know,
you've
like
already collabed with him, kind of, a little bit.
yes and no. Like he did, yes, he wrote like the melody to the chorus, like the vocal melody.
Mm-hmm.
And then he did the solo. But of course, like for me, if it was like if we actually wrote a song together and like put that song out, that would be amazing. Because I think he's an incredible songwriter.
Yeah.
And musician, player, like all around. So
And he's a really cool person. He's not,
yeah, he is.
It doesn't seem like he's got any ego or flack about who he is, which is great.
Not at all. He's so cool.
So speaking of things being cool, I'm really digging how these topics flow. You're an avid climber, mountain climber, hiking. You incorporate your extracurricular activities into vocals. as well as aliens. You're obviously in a lot of alien stuff. If anyone follows you on Twitch or is in the community, both of which things, to me, again, as I've said many times in our little show, I have to get behind lyrics personally to like a band. Like, so one of the first things I do if I hear a band or it's on, I know I'm old. I use Pandora and it plays a lot of similar stuff for me. I can't get in. Spotify's cool, but I just can't get into their modeling and their algorithms. But that's a whole nother episode. Do you write primarily most of the lyrics, or do you collab a little bit with Chris or the rest of the band? And how did you come up with, I'm going to incorporate some mountain climbing? I learned about what you call your mountain climbing tools, the Dark Machine. Like, I'm like, what is this song about? And you're like, oh, this is what I call, I guess there are hooks or claws that you use. I don't know anything about climbing, obviously.
Tools.
But like, I've never heard of a band talking about something like that in the lyrics, and it's cool. Your phrasing and how you're putting the words together and what you're saying, I had no idea you're talking about mountain climbing. Same with the alien themes that I may or may not be correct, but just seeing the videos that you've done for the songs on your EP had a definite alien abduction vibe to the videos, and I'm assuming that's part of lyrics too. So where are you getting the idea to incorporate this stuff, and are you coming up with this again on your own, or does everyone sort of have input topic wise on vocals?
Yeah, so I generally like to keep the door pretty open as far as topics. So I always ask the guys, like, oh, if anyone has ideas, like, just throw them at me, like, give me something to jump off of or whatever. And JP has definitely, sent me some phrasing before, and then, like, I'll rearrange stuff. And yeah, like, I've always been a big sci-fi nerd, and so are the guys, like JP and Chris. So we all have that in common. Like, I grew up, X-Files is like my favorite show. Like, I still actually just started rewatching it. So that's
Yeah,
like
it's so
my, like,
awesome.
I go to bed and that's like my comfort zone to have X-Files on in the background. So,
That's so
um,
awesome.
yeah, so, like, when I started doing vocals, I'm like, "Oh, like, what the fuck do I talk about?" Like, I'm really not like a poetic person. I'm like that person that doesn't know what the fuck to name songs or like name an album. Like, I'm not really like good with words. Like, I'm good with sounds, right?
Right.
I can put
Yeah.
songs together, but like words, I'm not really the best.
You're
So it
doing
was
good so
just
far. I'm just saying.
yeah. I'm like, all right, well, I really like sci-fi and I really like climbing. So let's just talk about like aliens and adventures.
Yeah, so awesome.
So it kind of just, it started there with Supermassive, and, having that whole concept of, being abducted and turning into this kind of like alien human hybrid, but it ends up being like a better version of yourself. And you're like fighting it at first because you don't understand it, you don't know what it is. And then, you are like a better version of yourself. It's really like open for interpretation. That's how like a lot of our stuff is. So even with songs like The Dark Machine, even though, like, yeah, I kind of do like directly talk about winter, and like, I say like climbing like lines or whatever. Sometimes you call a route like a line. But The Dark Machine can also like kind of have a sci-fi vibe to it as well and be interpreted like whatever you think it might be. Like a dark machine could be like technology right now, like your
Right,
phone. It could
AI.
be like a
Yeah.
Black Mirror thing. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, but the dark machines are actually like, it's a tool that Gravel makes. That's a brand. And they're called the Dark Machines. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna just name the song The Dark Machine, and it'll
Yeah.
kind of be like a cross between like, winter and climbing, and could interpret to some sci-fi vibes as well.
Yeah. That's